Thank you. Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett, and today I am going to get into a video on the difference between a networking career and a coding career. Now, as far as this goes, the reason why I'm making this is two major reasons. First off is I made a video a while back between accounting versus engineering, and this is the difference in the careers, information I gathered and whatnot. And basically, I was trying to figure out which path I wanted to take, and it turned out neither. But the information I had at the time, I figured it was just going to go to waste if I just didn't do anything with it. So I figured I'd give it out to everybody, and maybe it'll help you in your research. Same thing with this. I got a bit of a background with coding, and I got a little bit of background with networking and school and whatnot. But the one thing I want to mention is a lot of people were asking about this particular video, because the fact of the matter is a lot of people are trying to figure out which one's better to go to, the differences, pros and cons, and whatnot. So with that, I'm going to mention two other things before we jump on in. First things first, with the networking, I'm going to focus more on the Cisco networking. The fact of the matter is I don't really know much about Juniper networking. My background is more on Cisco, so Cisco certification, Cisco this, Cisco that. That's where my background is when it comes to networking, and then it comes to general stuff. But pretty much, if it's Juniper, I don't know. And you'll find that most people who go to networking, they don't cross-platform. It's not like a don't do it. It's just a, okay, you cross-platform, now what? What's the point? Very few jobs actually really require cross-platform, and very few will, and even less than that, will actually use the cross-platform. It's usually one or the other. So that's a big thing to note. Now, as far as that goes, the last thing I want to mention before we jump on in is I'm going to focus more on the cons of both sides, because why I figure it is if you can withstand the bad of a career, then you're good. Like, for example, if I said I did one of these videos on a doctor versus something else, well, the fact of the matter is I can tell you all day you're going to save lives and all the other crap that comes with it. But if I don't mention the fact that if you make a mistake that you can cost someone's life, and you don't see healthy people, you see sick people, something I learned when I was doing the vet stuff, you see people die all the time, depending on your career. Well, the fact of the matter is if I don't tell you those things, the negative things, and you go into career and you find out that, and it's just too much for you, and you wasted a long time just getting into the career, and you can't take it, so you got to switch to something else, I did you a disservice. That's the way I'm looking at it. I'm going to throw in some positives in there, but I'm really going to harp on the negatives, because if you can withstand the negatives, then as I see it, you can do the job, or at least you can at least stand the job, and then it's up to you to train into it and do the job. So as far as that goes, let's jump in the difference between networking and coding, and let's start with location. The big few things I look into whenever I look into going into a career is location, pay, availability, or entry level. So location, it's a big one. Coding is you can work remote in that. Now keep in mind the salary that I'm talking about for both networking and coding, you can go down to the 40s easily, 40,000 easily. You can go up to 100 and something. I've seen coding jobs 200, 300,000, and there's a well beyond that, but those are rare. Those are, don't even look for them, because you're wasting your time at that point. You might like find one out of a billion, and those are really, they already got someone in mind. But really, realistically, for coding, you can go fairly low. I've seen them in the 40s, 50 range to an easy 200 range, somewhere within there. It's more in the 170, 180 range. I've seen a lot in the 150 lately. I don't know why, but that's a big thing to note. So I'm really focused on that 100,000 range. It's the same thing with networking. I've seen that big of a gap. Again, with networking, it's a little bit easier to get beyond the 200 range, but it's going to be a lot of work. Like it's a little bit easier as far as a little bit more available, but it's going to be a lot of work, and I'll explain that in a bit. So as far as that goes, with coding, you will need to keep in mind that your location, if you're going to do it remote, you have a higher chance of doing coding remote for that type of price range at this given time in 2016. But if you want to go physical, go to a physical location. And when I talk about remote, I'm talking about you don't go in at all. You might go in 1 week out of a year, and many jobs, they don't want you come in at all. They just want the work done. So, whatever you do it, but that's it. Whereas if you are required to come in physically, then you will be around a metropolitan area. So if in the United States, DC, Boston, Charlotte's not like a huge one, but Boston is a huge one for coding on the eastern side. And then obviously Silicon Valley is a huge one over there, and there's a few other places, but it's metropolitan areas. London and Belgium and things of that, it's over there in Europe, so it's metropolitan areas. So it's pretty important to note that if you, in fact, where I'm at right now, I can't even get a coding job if I wanted to drive to it, because the nearest one is probably about 3 hours one way, so that's a 6-hour trip a day if I want to drive there, and that's just not going to happen for anyone under the sun. So basically, that's a big thing to note. So if you need to be there physically, then where are you at? And that's what's going to answer your question there. If you're like me in the middle of nowhere, then you can't do it. That's a dead one right there. Now, as far as networking, you won't go remote. You might. I've heard of people going remote, but basically they have to be in an area. So what happens is, okay, the network goes haywire, and same thing with server admins, stuff like that. The thing goes haywire. You have to go there, or you have to log in, and then you pretty much need to be going there. And I've seen it quite a few times, and when you're talking to individuals in networking that really gets into this, basically one thing that they'll really harp on is, if you're going into networking, expect to physically have to be there. You might be remote a few times a week, or you can even be remote a few weeks out of a month or something like that. But for the most part, you need to live in the area that the company is in, or whatever the job's in. And that's maybe a downside for someone like myself. I don't care for that, but I mean, it's not like enough to say no to for myself, but for some that could be. But one thing I want to mention though, real important, is with networking, is it's everywhere. So if there's a hospital nearby, you got networking. A school board, you got networking, you got, I mean, pretty much if you got a manufacturing, hospital, school board, or whatever, you can probably find a job in networking if there's an opening. That's a big thing to note. Now, unlike coding, and this is where the availability comes in play, is coding has a large demand for it. They need a lot of coders. Even still to today, there's somewhat of a demand. There's definitely a higher demand than networking, but there's still some of a demand for coders. Whereas networking, there's not. Basically, you will only see, say in a hospital, maybe 2-3 people at most. Most of the time, one person, literally, and then they'll have someone else that help them out in case they have to go out for a while. But for the most part, that's it. So it's like teachers. The way I view it is, it's like teachers. You can pretty much, if you're getting a teaching degree, you can get a job anywhere, but also nowhere at the same time. Because yes, there's schools all over the place, but almost no schools really are hiring unless you're going something like substitute teacher or you're networking in a way of getting to know the person and doing that method, not the cable routing switching networking. But that same thing applies there. Is if you want to go for a networking, a cable routing switching, you're going to have to network as far as get to know the people and have them bring you on board, because there really is almost no other way around the board, unless if you find something worthwhile, which could happen. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying that you're going to have a hard time finding stuff in certain areas. That's just a big thing to note. In other areas, you can find quite a bit, and maybe it's time of year or luck. But for the most part, when you compare the two, it's far easier to find a coding job than a networking job out there. It's just, there's just too many coding jobs out there to hide that. Now, as far as that goes, let's get into the entry level, and that's a big one. So the entry level is a huge difference between the two. So with coding, you don't even need a high school diploma for the most part. Some cases you will. Some cases you will need a bachelor's. Some cases I've seen it where you need a master's. But for the most part, 90 some odd percent of the time, they don't care about degree. They care more about portfolio. So as I harp in many of my videos in the past when I teach coding in my videos, which by the way, check them out if you're interested into coding, see if you can actually even stand it, because that is actual coding. So if you can't even do that, then why do you think you're going to be able to sit there for how many hours and try to make a product by yourself? That's a big thing, because you can't be bugging other people because they're working, and you will get fired for that. Because unlike manufacturing where you're talking to, hey Joe, blah 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 blah, no, they focus on that crap. And that's one thing I should bring up too, is with networking, you actually have that ability where you can talk to someone when you're working on something, unless if they're doing something very finite math wise or whatever. For the most part, I've done it myself. I've seen other people do it, where you're there hooking up cable routing or whatever it may be, and you're talking to someone else, you're joking around or whatever. With coding, no. There might be a small amount of that, but for the most part, no. You got to be focused. That's a big thing. So with that, coding, the entry level to it, well, it's pretty simple. You just need a portfolio, and you need a pretty good portfolio. The better portfolio, the better chance you're going to get a job. The experience you had in the past, the better chance. Now, with that, that's a hit or miss as far as if whatever you put out in front of someone will get you a job. Because keep in mind, this is highly demand, but a lot of people are going for it. But as far as that goes, okay, school's not for you. Well, you can probably still get a job. In fact, fairly easily. And we're talking about $100,000 job. We're not talking about working at McDonald's or something like that. We're talking about something actually worthwhile that you don't have to worry about stuff. Now, as far as that goes, I'm not going to get into is it advisable to get a degree or not, because I don't know that yet. But for the most part, let's get into the networking side of things. You don't need a degree to get in many of those jobs, but there is a ton of them you actually do. Just like coding, there is a ton of them that you actually do need a degree. But with networking, especially with Cisco base, it's more on certifications. So with coding, you don't have to worry about certifications. You just got to worry about your portfolio. It's like doing carpentry work or welding or something like that, where you will have pictures of your past work and whatever, if you're doing carpentry or architecture or something like that, right? Well, the fact of the matter is the same thing with coding. Is you'll put your stuff on GitHub, and you'll probably put some videos showing how your code works and stuff like that. Stuff that I do, and I try to teach people on the method on exactly how to get this stuff done, so it helps you out building your portfolio. Because recruiters love that; they eat that up. But and managers, they eat that up. Well, with networking, you need certifications. It's more about the certifications. And then it's about your professional experience. So you got to be able to talk the talk. You got to be able to walk the walk. But with certifications, I want to harp on this one for a bit. So there's certifications called CCNA, CCNP, CCNE, and let's not worry about what they stand for. Just note that CCNA is a base level, that it really doesn't get you any job. CCNP, it's a step between the CCNA and CCNIE, and the CCIE is one of the topper ones, and then there's further. So with that, the all the Cisco certifications, they are very, very expensive. You're talking about hundreds to thousands of dollars easily for the certification alone, not the learning material, but just the certification alone. And with that, you got to retake these certifications, and we're talking about, it's not like cosmetology where you just reapply. We're talking about you actually have to go in, take the certification, pass the certification, and then every 2 years, before the 2-year mark, you need to be able to show that you took the certification again. You're retaking the entire test for the most part. And there's ways around it, not around the certification portion, but if like say for example you're going for a CCNP and you're thinking about going for a CCIE, well, you can go for the CCIE, and one part of the CCIE will take care of the CCNP. So there's your extra 2 years. But for the most part, once you get to the point, it gets a little bit wishy-washy, but for the most part, you're going to have to take the certifications. You're always going to have to study for the certification if you don't have the material in front of you. It's always getting harder. That's one thing that some don't tell you is it's always changing. Every so often it changes, and it just gets more and more difficult. More things are added onto it, it might be focused on this area 1 year, and the next time you take it, it will be focused on a different area, and then it'll be focused on their area the next time. So that's a big thing to note in itself. I've talked to people who actually make the certification, who's on the board and to decide which way it goes. And one thing they're talking about is they're trying to make it more tricky. At least that's what someone said. I don't know what that means, but I don't like the sound of it. I don't like the sound, and I never liked it when teachers, they try to give you trick questions or some weird crap like that. It's either you know it or you don't know it. And I don't know if that's the way they're going to go, but it's going to get more tricky, and that's literally the words. It's going to get more tricky. I don't know what that means, but I don't like the sound of it. And for the most part, what really pushed me away from networking, not that I can't do it, not that I hate it or anything like that. In fact, I don't mind it. It's more of I don't want to take this certification and be tested every time. And then one thing to note is if you fail the certification, so like you got a job somewhere that requires a certification, unless they're bending and breaking the rules for you, which probably ain't going to happen, what's going to end up happening is, okay, you failed it, you're out of job. Simple as that. So that's a big thing to note. You're always studying because your job depends on it. And I don't care for those type of things. But you might enjoy that. You might be more than happy to do it. So I just want to point that one out there. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it. It's just that, there's other options. And I'm going to exercise those other options until I can't anymore. But with that, as far as that goes, let's get into the pay and the types of jobs, contract versus other. So the pay with networking, if it depends. If you go for Cisco level, higher end level stuff, you can get quite a bit of pay. We're talking about 80, 90, something like that. You're going to top out at a certain point. I'm finding it's about 120, maybe a little bit higher, depending on the job. And there is some jobs that go way, way, way beyond that. But we're talking about on an average range. But more than likely, you're going to start around the 50, 60, 70 mark. And you have to build up from there. And that's not that bad. But with coding, a junior level coder in most places is $60,000. In Dropbox, they pay their interns $90,000 a year for coding. See the difference? And Cisco, because they're right there. I talk to them every so often. Got contacts in. Their interns, which I actually looked at doing, is around, I couldn't get the exact number, but somewhere between 30 and 45,000. I couldn't get the exact number because they were being weird about it, but I was able to get within that range. And that's a freaking big company. So Dropbox and many of these other areas, Amazon and some of these others, they're paying their interns double, if not triple, than that. And that's a coding intern. Now, on average, you're not going to deal with that. So on average, an intern's probably going to get probably the same amount as that. So, 30, 40, 45, something like around that range. But for the most part, the normal coders get around 100, 120, 130. I've been seeing a lot of 150s lately. I don't know why, but I've seen that with networking. I might see similar levels, similar years of experience and stuff like that. 90,000, 100,000 at best, 110. So that's a massive difference between 150 and 110. And then the networking person has to retake their certification every so often. And a lot of companies, I forgot to mention this, is a lot of companies, they don't reimburse you for your certification. There's some companies that do, but there's a lot of companies, because I asked around and I was surprised about this one. A lot of companies do not reimburse you for your certification. That comes out of your pocket. So it comes out of your pocket just to keep your own job, which I don't like at all. But what are you going to do about it? Whereas coding, you need to keep up with the stuff, but you can get the information pretty much for free. You're going to have to deal with the projects and stuff, and you probably should be doing projects on your own time to learn this stuff on top of whatever you're doing at work. But you're not, I mean, I've seen a lot of startups, a lot of major companies that will give a 2,000. I just looked at one the other day that gave a $5,000 budget per year to learn from, to go to whatever, Lynda, Treehouse, whatever, use the money for that to learn from, to do your job better. Whereas with the networking, depending on the company, you might get that lucky, but I'm finding more than not that's not going to be the case, and that comes out of your pocket. So it's a reverse on that. Now, as far as that goes, stability, before I forget to mention this, networking is the more stable. If you want to keep the job itself, this goes with the types. So more than not, a lot of coders, they tend to do job hopping. Not necessarily because you get more money to do whatever, to hop from company to company. It's more than less that what happens is the project gets done, you're not really needed as much, so go somewhere else. And some coders and a lot of coders, they want the challenge all the time. They don't want the stability is secondary versus the challenge, and that's a big thing that you need to note. So that's one thing that happens. But what I found is stability lowers your pay dramatically. So that's a huge thing. If you want a stable job, you're gonna probably knock off 20,000 off of whatever. So instead of 150, you're going 130, or instead of 100,000, you're going to 80,000. So something around that. And then if you want a remote, you need to knock off a little bit more. But again, coding is less stable as far as you're probably going to job hopping quite a bit, depending on your scenario. There will be scenarios out there where you don't have to do that, but more than not, if you do your research, you're going to find most people, even if they think they're getting into a stable environment, they're at least job hopping every 5 to 10 years, which is not that bad. Actually, not that bad at all, because it's like manufacturing. Manufacturing is about the same rate for that. But what I've seen some do is they job hop every 6 months to every year. That's something, and what I'm finding from people who do that is they tend to be more of a wanting to go more freelance, but keeping the benefits and stuff like that. There's also a lot of freelance coders out there. That's a big thing to note. Where networking, you can go into freelance, you can go and contract and stuff like that, but there's also a crap ton of them that are just stable, because they're here at Mount Olive Pickle Plant. You got cable runners for networking. You got, regular individuals deal with networking, stuff like that, where you really wouldn't have someone doing contract work, working on 100-something-year-old buildings and stuff like that, and constantly have to go back and forth to fix things because it's a humid environment, because they're pickling stuff. Humid salt environments, you constantly have to switch parts out, fix things, stuff like that. So they have some people on task, on thing. But that job, by the way, because I know the price point is about $35,000, and that's an actual job. That's something to keep in mind. So I think I pretty much covered most of everything I was going to cover. Last thing I want to mention, just to add a little bit of a tidbit in here, is what I found with coding and the degrees is most degrees doesn't really get too heavy into coding. You might get, 120 credit hours or something like that for a bachelor's. You might get 12 to 24, maybe 30 if you're lucky, credit hours in coding, and the rest is in whatever else. Obviously your maths and sciences, but the computer repair, networking, whatever else, that's a big thing to note. Whereas networking, which is what my schooling is in, it's pretty much all the entire degree. There's security behind it, there's this, there's that, but the entire thing's networking. That's a big thing to note. I mean, obviously you got the maps and whatnot, but it's networking. So that's a big thing to note, is if you're going to go to school to learn this stuff, then I wouldn't say go to school for the coding. Use boot camps, use free things online, use sites like lynda.com, Udacity, Treehouse, things of that nature, and you can get more of a leg up than you would if you went to school. And thing to note with boot camps is a company probably isn't going to hire you because of the boot camp. A company's going to hire you because of your projects that you did in the boot camp, mostly that you are doing projects. And if you're going to boot camp and you're putting out projects every so often, you need to keep putting out projects even after you're gone, because that's where recruiters say, okay, we're going to wait for a month or two to see what happens with this person. Okay, they're not putting out any more projects, so all right, they're not worthwhile. That's what they're looking for. So that's a thing to note. You can use boot camps to learn, find a good one, do your research and stuff like that. But what I'm going to tell you right now is, if you're going to go to school, look at what they have to offer. I will be looking at the classes more than the degree, because that's what everybody will be looking at more. But anyways, as far as that goes, this has been Craig Bennett, Habit. This has been Craig Bennett. Please leave a like, subscribe, share, and check out the Patreon and everything else. And I'll see you next video.